What is going on, Panthers Nation? What's going on, y'all? Happy Tuesday night, August 20th. First of all, happy birthday to my mother in law, who I know is not watching this, but one day she'll go back and say, "Oh my gosh, he told me happy birthday." No, but seriously, happy birthday to her. And let's get this thing rolling. Oh, I still got music rolling in the background. Thank you. Faded away. All right, folks. Man, back at practice for the Carolina Panthers, right? Did get to hear from our good old friend and man at the helm and Dave Canales today. I'm not playing any of his clips or anything like that. Just been a busy day. And I was like, you know what? We're just going to get in here and jump right into it. So that's exactly what's going to happen. So before we get into the thick of this, because we are going to get into a prediction. I shouldn't say prediction. 53-man roster updates. Sitting back with my feet up with a glass of Maker's Mark on ice. I hear you, man. I hear you. All right, let's take this banner off because I'm clearly live, but if you are here, please follow. Please hit subscribe, all the fun stuff that comes with this, but we're going to jump right in. So there's a lot that's happened since the game the other night, roster-wise. We're going to get you caught up to speed if you have not paid attention. So I went on ESPN Wilmington today. Shout out to my man Randy Slack. Always give shout out to Randy for having me on. It is much, much appreciated. And we got to talk about a lot of things, but one of the things we talked about is the Carolina Panthers transactions. Just if you go back and look at when training camp kicked off, and this is not looking at the players that are placed on PUP or activated from PUP and the things that go with that. When you look at the number of transactions by this team, I mean it's close to 50. I think it was like 55, which is by far the most active team in the NFL right now. And I think of that in a few ways. I think of that as like, well, part of the reason you're having to make so many transactions is one, you do have some injuries. So as injuries pop up, it's natural to go out. And at this state of camp, you're not going to sit back and wait around. Unfortunately, that's the nature of the business. If you get hurt in this stage, it's next man up. Let's move on. Let's bring someone in versus like if this happens later in the season or in the season or even a practice squad guy, there's going to be a little more flexibility to wait to see like what is the recovery time going to look like. But in here, it's like, all right, you're hurt. Sorry, move on. We'll waive you. Get a new person in here, which you are seeing some of the players who are waived because of injuries coming back. But you look at it from that standpoint. So sure, you throw in the bucket of injuries, but then you also kind of think of it as a talent deficiency standpoint. So this team was 2-15 last year. And so coming into this season, when you haven't hit on all your draft picks, I know we did quite a few nice things in the offseason with free agency, but you also look at some of the players that were let go and go look at our dead cap space, and that's taken up a significant portion of the roster. But those were also some starters from last year. You look at a DJ Chark, a Von Bell, a Hayden Hurst. Those guys were signed to long-term contracts. Now, DJ Chark was not. His money was just deferred down the road. But you look at those decisions, you kind of mix them all together. It's just like the Panthers are talent deficient, and they're having to continue to go out and try to find this guy, pull in this guy. And it's not a knock on who we have and what we have in the building. I think it's just like this is how we got to this point. We tried to make some transactions with some veteran players. A Houston doesn't pan out. Keeping a salary on the books. You look at some of these other misses that have happened along the way. But diving in, it's been busy, man. And I honestly can't remember the last time that I was on here where we left off. But you go back and look at, just the offensive line itself that played this past week and the guys that were really put out here last minute. There were some big contributions, one on the offense and defensive side of the ball for some of these guys that were just picked up. Jaden Peavy, defensive tackle on the defensive side of the ball. Walter Palmore, significant reps as well. Jack Anderson on the offensive line, who I'm not, again, a PFF guy, but I know Jack Anderson got pretty good grade from what I saw, one of the top grades there. You mix that in, Mason Brooks, I mean, it's unreal and what's happening as they try to build out depth. But taking a look here, the cornerback position, and we're going to get into the roster here in just a minute, or 53-man prediction. Cornerback position, which at one point seemed stable when you think about Jackson being healthy, both Jacksons, Dane and Lamar. And now all of a sudden it's like, what happened? Panthers are scrambling to find cornerbacks. And so now you bring in three, and Chris Wilcox, Quandre Mosley, and Willie Drew. We know Willie Drew was already here, so you're bringing him back. You throw in that mix Sam Pinckney. This is unrelated, but you have Sam Pinckney coming back, which I'm glad. Really liked him out of Coastal. And Jaden Sheridan. And for me, this is not a question about Sheridan. I just don't understand. Like, one, I know that at this back end of the roster was Sheridan and Dylan Johnson. Both, when you look at those guys, like, there's a good chance they're practice squad guys. Pick one, whoever you decide to keep, practice squad. But Dylan Johnson goes out there and runs his butt off. I mean, I don't know. He put up over 80 yards. I was looking at the preseason rushing stats because I guess they mean something. They practically mean nothing. But he was like number 8 in rushing yards in the preseason. Out of all the backs, he scored the lone touchdown, and he gets let go. It's a tough business, man. Sometimes I just don't know. So you've got multiple cornerbacks coming in. Sam, Jaden Sheridan, you placed Anthony Brown and Jake Luton on IR, which brings up a pretty big question this week. So you're carrying 3 quarterbacks heading into the final preseason game. Whether or not Bryce Young plays, like, the Panthers are going to have an option to have a second quarterback available. This is, hypothetical. Bryce Young doesn't play. Is it Andy Dalton? Are you giving Andy Dalton reps and snaps? You're going to have somebody, or is he just going to be dressed and suited up in the event that Jack gets hurt and you just push Jack out there and play the entire game? I don't know, man. It's a weird situation, and we can talk all about whether the starter should play. I just, again, was talking to Randy about that today. I don't see them playing, and I know we've heard from Canales that I don't think he cares that it's Buffalo's 2s or 3s, that he still sees value in getting those guys out there. He always positions it as it's valuable if the lineup that you're putting out there is healthy. So his mind, if you're putting out a Bryce Young and Taylor Moton and then 2s or 3s, doesn't make sense to him. But if you're putting out the entire set of 1s, and you feel like you can get valuable reps out of that, then you do it. There's just part of me doesn't. I just feel like we're not going to see the 1s. But you do have to account for a backup quarterback to go out there in the event that Jack Plummer gets hurt in the preseason. So I don't know, man. It's a weird one, and I'm a fan of Canales. I'm a fan of his approach. I'm cool with him trying different things. Week 1, whether it is fair or not for the Carolina Panthers to go out there in week 1, travel down to New Orleans, and they don't do well on the offensive side of the ball. I should say, caveat all this, I feel comfortable with the defense not playing. I think what we've seen from them and what Evero has done on that side of the ball, yeah, they can pack it up and go to the house and don't have to play a rep. This is a brand new offense. It's a brand new staff on that side of the ball. It's a brand new group as far as working together on the offensive line, receivers. And I know you've got your practice and you've got your reps, but like for me, there's some things that you just can't practice without actually practicing it. We can tote the success of the joint practice and how well they did. Everything in those environments is controlled. Down and distance situation, I'm sure, I know there's some live action, but as far as when you get into a game, man, there's no control. Like whatever happens, happens. And there's small nuances to it. Getting the play call in, getting in and out of the huddle. Like if you screw up in practice, it's just like, oh, let's run that back. I mean, there's really no pressure. And of course, yeah, you can have a penalty if you're going to call it. Back it up. It's just a little bit different. And the crowd, like whether or not it's a big crowd or not, it's a different nuances. I even heard some folks talk just not only getting in and out of the huddle, but the way that you communicate as a unit, because you're going to have to then come over to the sideline and like, what are you seeing? How are you working together? And for me, Dave Canales is the offensive coordinator. As far as like, I should say the play caller, not the coordinator. Canales is the one calling the plays. And to this point, I don't think he's had to really worry about huddling up on the sideline with the offense after they come off the field for a series, because he's like, oh, this is the preseason. It's the backups. I don't really need to be over here. When you get into real live action games, like how is he going to be splitting his time as the head coach of the team who is managing everything, but also coordinating with the offense around what they're seeing? And I know he's got Brad Idzik and he's going to have eyes and ears around him, but I'm like, have we really gotten into what that dynamic is going to look like? Because you can't just not pop over, or I know it's very small nuances to it, but I don't think we're gonna see starters this week. I would be very surprised. And on the flip side, you could come out of this looking like a genius. You come out, they play well, everything goes the way that it should. Panthers come out looking fantastic. Yeah, make everyone out there kind of eat their crow on this, which is what I really hope happens. But I think it's just because we haven't seen it. We haven't seen it done before. And I think a lot of folks have talked about just the change in the offseason program with training camp, with OTAs, and the preseason, that it's just all shifted. And I know there's other coaches, and I've shared clips of Raheem Morris talking about the Falcons and not playing Penix. And I know other teams sitting out coaches, but then you do have well-established teams and Andy Reid's that are putting their starters out there, getting in those valuable reps just so they can get that fluidity together and go from there. But anyways, enough rambling about that. I'm going to hop over into the 53-man roster prediction. Yeah, Andrew Rain was funny. I talked through, I don't know how many people listen to the show, but it's funny, before training camp, I talked to Cassidy Hill, who's Panthers.com, and I was like, yeah, what have you seen out of Andrew Rain? And at the time, it was like, she was like, who? And so like he had just not made that much of an impact in the offseason program, which makes sense because there was a bigger rotation on the offensive side of the ball, but he's come alive. I would agree with that. Also agree that running backs, yep, definitely a crowded room. Still feel like we carry 4, but wouldn't be surprised if we get down to 3. Yeah, you think he's going to hang around? I do, man. I mean, it's weird to see him still. Not weird, but there was a lot of conversations when Canales was hired around or questioning his thoughts on the third quarterback. And way back in the beginning, he sounded like he wanted to lean on a veteran presence. And now he's going with this rookie, undrafted free agent, which isn't terrible. But yeah, I mean, you're going to need a third quarterback, and he's already learning the offense. Depending on how long Luton's going to be out, yeah, there's definitely a chance that he sticks around and makes it. I hope so, man. I hope there's this big element of surprise just boiling up, getting ready to take over the league. Oh, I hope so. All right, let's switch over to this. And I realize I don't have my charger up here, so I got to get through this pretty quickly to make sure the battery doesn't die. All right, y'all. So if you followed the first one that I did of this live and or watched the podcast episode, it's not much of a change, but I do think there's a few caveats to what we talk through when we get into the final cuts. Number one, we are less than a week away from final cuts. Under at 4 p.m. 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on, I'll tell you, on the 27th, this thing is official, man. Getting down to the 53. Let me see. 1 second. Let's pull up. I just had it pulled up. Here we go. I'll share this really quickly, and then we'll hop back over. Significant dates. So it is August 27th. It is prior to 4 p.m. New York time, which is, we know, Eastern Standard Time. It's happening, man. It's here. A lot of things to go through. You know, who's going to be moved to PUP, which I know we have a few players on PUP now, but you've got likely designations on PUP, possibly designations of IR, which they have the ability to come back, but you know, all those nuances will play an impact into what this looks like. So it moves pretty fast as far as like I know a lot of what we're going to be talking about is the ability to claim players off of waivers. So the period, so you have those by 4 p.m., which we know some teams like get it done earlier in the day. Most teams, you know, they're not putting it right up at the line. But you have that 4 p.m. cutoff until 12 o'clock noon on the 28th to put in your waiver claims. So at that point, I think we'll have a decent idea. Let's see. Let's see what else they have on here for talking about IR, practice squad, all that fun stuff. All right. Last year, the Panthers claimed 3 off of waivers. I wouldn't be surprised if they have 5 or 6 claims this year. I mean, that's my initial thought. But all right, let's start with the easiest group. We're going to start. Yeah, you know what? Hold on 1 second before I do this, because I've done this like 3 times now, and I'm actually going to get it right this time. Because the last time I did this. All right. Now we're going to try this again. I just have a typo, and I've presented this like 3 times with the typo, which is fun. All right. Offensive side of the ball, start with quarterbacks. Again, we're getting down to the 53. Just to, you know, go back. Oops. Why did this do this? I'm sitting here talking, y'all, and did not share it. We're going to try this again because I keep just messing up. All right. Now we are going to present in full screen and try this again. All right. Okay. Offensive side of the ball. So we split this, and remember, 53 special teams is set. You have 25 and 25. I split it down the middle. Not necessarily what it's going to end up being, but quarterbacks, Bryce Young, Andy Dalton. There's not, I mean, nothing to talk about there. Those are the two. I do think Jack Plummer, potentially, like we were talking about, is your practice squad quarterback. It ends up that, that's who they keep around as the third. So two there. Running backs, nothing has changed for me for our initial 53-man cut. We've seen a lot of Mike Boone, not so much as Raheem, with Raheem Black year, and I don't know if that's good or bad, if he's safer than we think, or there is more pressure on him. I have 4 here with the caveat that I think Jonathan Brooks goes on PUP. It just makes sense when you have Canales saying like week 3, week 4, you go ahead and you put him on PUP. You're not really hurting anything by putting him on there. Like, so what if he could technically be ready a week early? Put him on PUP and then navigate that. Now, I do think when Brooks gets back, that you could see someone else, a corresponding move to make room for him, because we're not going to have 5. We're not going to have 5 running backs on the active roster. But to the flip side, I could also see us getting down to 3. So that means a lot of things, because it's Chuba, it's Miles, and Raheem. But what if we get to a point where it's Chuba, Miles, and Jonathan Brooks, Raheem to the practice squad, Mike to the practice squad? Is Miles traded? There's just a lot of nuances to like what this final could look like, but that's my list. Wide receiver, this group as well. When I look at the wide receiver group, I think the top 4 on this list are locks. I don't think there's any question about Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, Jonathan Mingo, or Xavier Legette. Those 4 locked in. When we get into the bottom half here, this is where there's just a lot of moving parts with Terrace Marshall Jr., Amir Smith-Marset, and David Moore. And I'm not the one, and I'm glad I'm not the one that has to make the decision on this. I'm not the one grading these guys and stacking and making decisions. It's going to be tough, though. I mean, I do think Terrace Marshall Jr., I think his stock has gone up a little bit. I do think there is a chance he makes it, and he may be a little bit safer than some folks think. To the flip side, we never know. Like, we never know what can happen. Amir Smith-Marset, whose stock is kind of up and down, saw an explosive play today, a long deep pass. The thing with him is he is valuable as a returner, punt return primarily. Probably could get back there on kick return if needed. You have that. You have him as kind of the gadget guy. But he's in the mix kind of with this group. And then David Moore. And David Moore, the factor that helps him maybe a little more than some of the others is the fact that he has played for Dave Canales in Seattle and Tampa Bay. He also has experience in the return game. So for me, I mean, we could be really shocked here. And if they decide that, hey, we can get, a punt returner out of someone else on the roster, they only keep 5, or they do decide to keep 6. The other piece that I'll throw in is waiver wire. Like when we're looking at some of the positions that where the Panthers could go in waiver wire, I look at wide receiver, possibly offensive line. I'd even throw a tight end in the mix. Like, why not? And I don't think there's really going to be anyone that jumps out at the tight end position. Cornerback and outside linebacker are kind of the groups that I'm focused on. So I wouldn't be surprised, though, because I think there are some pretty notable names that could be available. Not super notable because they're getting cut, but some guys that are out there. Jalen Coker, I don't have him in this mix right now. I know a lot of folks like him, but I think he is destined for practice squad, which isn't a bad thing. I think he can develop on the practice squad, which is what a lot of folks want to see. Let me hop over here. I think so. I was looking back at hold on, pull up the I should have brought my charger up here so that I could actually make sure I could stay on here. I was looking at a stat the other day. I want to make sure I actually get it right. Oh my gosh, what is going on here? I'm on NFL.com, but this thing is like moving slow. I think I have it in. I'm trying to pull something up if I can get to it. I want to just make sure that I wasn't imagining what I remembered and saw, because I think it did have an impact on this. We're going to try to find it. Let's see. Yeah. So there is an ongoing competition. So Raheem Blackshear did not, which I think he's pretty solidified as a kick returner should he make the 53-man roster. The other night, and I don't know how many people noticed this or paid attention, Amir Smith-Marset and David Moore returned kickoffs and punts. So I know we think of Amir Smith-Marset as a punt returner. I know David Moore also getting reps as a punt returner, but both of those guys returned punts and kicks, which it's another thing. That's why I think there's a really good chance that David Moore potentially ends up making the final cut. It's tough because I really like Amir Smith-Marset, but Amir Smith-Marset, I can share this just to show you really fast. Amir Smith-Marset had one punt return for 5 yards, which I know he's more of a dynamic punt returner. David Moore just had a fair catch. And then kick return, they both had 2 kick returns. 2 for Amir Smith-Marset averaged 24.5, so a little bit longer in his return, but Moore was also there. So I really think this is like a snap for snap, rep for rep competition for the final wide receiver spot, at least out of this group in my mind right now. But yeah, tight ends. Sorry, what was the other one? Make sure I get that. Moore is the vet. He really is. It's just an edge, man. It's like who you know helps in this league. It really does. Tight end, Tommy Tremble, Jasavian Sanders, Ian Thomas, Jordan Matthews. I feel like that's a lock. I think the only other question would be like, what if we decide to keep 3 or Panthers decide to keep 3, like who's the odd man out? I think Jordan Matthews has shown quite a bit. I think Jatavian Sanders is going to come into his own probably closer into the second half of the year. And I think we're going to have to rely heavily on Tommy Tremble, who's been putting in a lot of work on the jug machines and in general, and is on the road. I know he actually got out at practice today, so he's like officially making that recovery. Ian Thomas, another one, as far as injuries to watch as we get into week 1, if he's going to be available or not. But out of this group, at least right now, those 4. The last on the offensive side of the ball, the offensive line. This is another group. So I look at the first 7: Austin Corbett, Damian Lewis, Robert Hunt. This is no particular order. Ike Ekwonu, Taylor Moton, Brady Christensen, Chandler Zavala. I look at those 7 as locks right now, especially some good news with Zavala, and I know he's gotten some praises throughout camp. The bottom, like right now, and I know you have Ricky Lee, there's quite a few other undrafted guys. I moved Jack Anderson into the list. I think that's a bit of a stretch, but I think for me personally, I still think the Panthers are going to look at the waiver wire to kind of fill this thing out, unless they feel confident in Jack. Say, hey, you know what? We're able to roll with him. But the injury with Mays, I don't know, stacking that up, what that looks like. And then we know Yash, I'm guessing with the setback, whatever that is, that we probably have Yash maybe going on IR to start the year. So I do think they keep 9. I just think it's a question of who are the last 2 or 3 offensive linemen. And today, I don't know who's gonna be cut. We're talking about 1,000 players available, so it's hard for me to go out and guess who the last 2 or 3 and where they may come from. But I do think the bottom half of this may look a little bit different once we get into it. Let's talk about defense. I'm just saying behind it, Ian. Oh man, Ian, y'all have people give him such a hard time. Which I get. You know what? The other thing I was gonna say, man, Damian Lewis, and no idea if he's ever gonna watch this, but if you are a fan of the Carolina Panthers, or maybe you're not, maybe you're just a nice human being, I would send words of encouragement to Damian Lewis if you one, if you ever see him, but if you interact with him online, no idea what he went through, what was going on personally in his life, but I know he went through some stuff over this. He did not disclose it. We'll probably never know, but it does sound like it hit him pretty hard. And he even got almost emotional towards the end of the press conference today. I think they were trying to pry in, which I'm not a big fan of, and ask when he really wasn't ready to open up about it. But I say all that like encouraging and just being a good human. Like I'd recommend that. But all right, defensive ends. I think this group: Derek Brown, Ashawn Robinson, T.J. Smith, LeBrian Ray. Those are my 4. Now, Jaden Crumedy, I know, here's the thing. When you get injured in camp, you're not really disclosing the significance of the injury. And even Dave Canales today said they were going to hold some things closer to the chest. Like he's not going to be as open about injuries, like, which I don't blame him because one, you got to think about waivers. People are going to be like, oh, well, what position groups are these guys probably going to be thinking about claiming? But also just going into the first week of the season, I know you'll have to give an official injury report, but at least holding it in as long as possible before you give the Saints any type of edge or advantage. So I do think 5 right now. And I mean, where you could see it is possibly 4 if Crumedy bumps down to the practice squad or is placed on IR. Nose tackle position, defensive tackle, just 2, Shy Tuttle, Nick Thurman. I think that's another one that's pretty easy to go through. This is the slide I originally messed up and had running backs on the title. It is your inside linebackers with Shaq Thompson, Josie Jewell, Trevin Wallace, man. Trevin Wallace, another pick in practice, picked off Aaron Rodgers, looked great the other night. He got voted best player for player of the game by y'all, the fans on X. If you don't know what that is, you got to go out to X and vote. We're going to open it up on YouTube too, but I think that last spot with right now, I do think I have Colin Cherylus just based off of the preseason and camp, which you may wonder, well, where's Michael Barrett? 7th round draft pick out of Michigan. I think possibly practice squad for him, but this is where I don't know what the Panthers value. Like, do they value an additional linebacker over a cornerback or over a receiver? Because you could shift some things around there and potentially having him make the cut. But those are the 4. Yeah. Well, I don't know how. One, you kind of said it right there. Undrafted free agent. So he is an undrafted free agent. I don't think he's going to end up making the final cut. I think he's going to be a practice squad guy. I don't know if you missed the first part. I was telling folks I talked to Cassidy Hill of Panthers.com right before training camp. And I asked her, I said, so the center position, we know about Austin Corbett, Brady Christensen. I was like, what about Andrew Rame? And she's like, who? And it wasn't a knock on him. I think that's just like through OTAs and the offseason, he had not made that significant of an impact. Now, that's not to say that here recently as he stepped in that he hasn't, because there's no doubt that he's definitely come alive here in the last few weeks. I just don't think the Panthers, given that you can rotate either a Mays when healthy or Brady Christensen, you're going to take one of those guys versus over. You're looking for, when you look at your back end of you're going to have 5 starting offensive linemen. Your next 4, they've got to be able to play multiple positions. And right now, Andrew Rame, I mean, he's been a center his entire life. Not that he couldn't move positions, but you need players on the back end that can move around as needed. I still think you will keep him on the practice squad though, which won't be bad at all. Trevin is balling, man. He really is. And Leota. Good gosh. I tell you what, it does give us a little bit of hope that maybe things are going to be okay, or at least better than we thought. It's still tough, man. So you have Jadeveon Clowney, DJ Johnson, who's also stepped up. I really like Iku, what he's done in the preseason. My question mark here is Clavon Chasen. Like, I think by default, he's making just default as it is today, he would make the roster. Those are your four, but that's why I say I also believe the Panthers have the potential to look at the waiver wire for another outside linebacker and bring them in. Amari Barno, who's recovering from the ACL, I think possibly goes on IR. And remember DJ Wonham, who we thought, hey, he would help make up for some of the Brian Burns production, him and Clowney. And he's hurt, and there's a setback there, which is unfortunate. So I think there's a chance he goes on IR to start the season. So it's a lot of question marks there in a position group that is going to have a lot of pressure and hopefully generates a lot of pressure this year. Derek McLendon at the bottom, like, don't have him in here, but he's definitely shown some promise here as well. The cornerback room, my gosh. I talked about cornerbacks when I started the stream, and this room that was actually building some stability, some depth, felt like, oh my gosh, maybe we're actually going to be okay. And you just have injuries popping up. This one is tough. So I have us keeping 4, but like, who's the 4th? I mean, you really have to start looking at someone else that was brought in. I think there's got to be a veteran signing. You got to bring in a veteran, or you're going to have to claim someone off waivers. This is a must need. And I know, like I said, they just brought in 3 guys yesterday, today. But you got J.C. Horn, who we know, hoping for a healthy year, that he's able to stay healthy. Should he not, you're in real trouble. But as it stands today, you have DiCaprio Bootle and J.C. Horn. It's maybe that's your 1-2. I don't know. Deshaun Jameson, who hasn't been great either. That's it, man. And Lamar Jackson, unfortunately, got injured. He was showing a lot of progress. I thought for sure he was going to step up, which he did. He did get waived, but I saw Mike K tweet that even though he was waived, nobody picked him up, so he's reverted to IR. So maybe we're able to keep him around, and he gets back to recovering. And then Dane Jackson, unfortunately, Dane gets hurt. Tell you what, man, gotta do something. Stephon Gilmore, not an option. Are they going to pick? They've got to. Like, unless you're just going to hope that one of these guys you just brought in amongst the other however many that you've already got in here, like one of those guys is going to step up out of that group. It's not a great spot to be in. Yeah, man. So yeah, Charles Smith Wade is on here. Great question. So I have him at the. Yeah, so I do think. I mean, I think a lot of things have happened in favor. So some of these guys that we probably thought practice squad or cut, injuries that have happened, I think have elevated some of these guys. And we've heard Coach talk about Charles Smith Wade quite a bit, primarily at the nickel position, playing inside versus where he played, outside in college, and Troy Hill. So I do think right now I have both of these guys on the 53-man roster. Again, it wouldn't surprise me if which we'll have to get to the next screen, but there's another player that I think could also kind of fit into this game just based off the way that he's played over the last few weeks. So why not? Let's jump right in. The last position group, safeties. Another group that, man, the health of this team. And as you start to go through all these injuries, you're like, oh, okay, now I see why Canales isn't playing the starters. But I think Jordan Fuller and Nick Scott are likely your two starters, at least going into week 1. Alex Cook is your backup. We've seen him show off in a few spurts. Jamie Robinson, if y'all remember the first time that I passed through this list, I had him. He wasn't on here. He has shown, or he's done everything possible to force his hand into making this roster. We've seen him at the safety position and at the nickel position as well. So for me, that's where between Jamie and Shaw, like I could see Jamie potentially taking over his spot if they had it, to make a cut somewhere else. And then the health, man, Xavier Woods. I don't know how long he's going to be. Wait, I don't know that we'll know until we get closer to the season. And then Sam Franklin Jr., who we know is going to be out quite a bit. Man, injuries suck. that's really the crux of it all there. Oh, man. Oh, no, you're good. Oh, good, y'all. Oh, man. I don't know where the visor is, to be honest. I always keep the visor in here, and I don't know where the heck I put it the other day. I got all my hats, so yeah, unfortunately, I don't have the visor on. Oh, man, I appreciate it, Antonio, man. Yeah, I appreciate y'all. Appreciate y'all tuning in. Well, my laptop is down to about keep pounding down to like 19%, which is not good because pretty close to this thing will go down to 0 in no time. So probably gonna do it for tonight, but appreciate all y'all folks for tuning in, and y'all have a good one. I'll be back later this week with some more stuff, but till then, keep pounding, and I will see y'all later.